this was not the beginning of that well-known Welsh emigration to Patagonia. It was a different project, almost 250 years earlier. This settlement was planned for the opposite end of the Americas, in what is now Canada. And the fate of this endeavour was to be very different to that of Uladva in Argentina.
This is the story of Cambriol, a Welsh colony that was planned in the early years of the 1600s. The man behind it was William Vaughan, a writer, poet, idealist, and perhaps above all, a man with a great ambition.
He was born in 1574 at Gelliair, or Golden Grove, Carmarthenshire, into a prosperous family. He was sent to London for his education, studied law at Oxford from the age of 14, gained a master's degree, and later took himself off for a grand tour of France, Italy, and Austria. He also studied at Vienna. On his return, he became High Sheriff of Carmarthenshire. He married, but tragically his wife Elizabeth and young son Francis died when lightning struck their home. 8 years later, he married a woman called Anne Christmas of Colchester, and they had 6 children.
William was appalled at the miserable living conditions of most Welsh people. He wrote that thousands die for the most part from lack of fire, food and raiment. He dreamed of a new land where people could have better lives.
He wrote about his idea in a book called Golden Grove. He considered locating his colony in various places, including the remote and tiny island of St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean. But in 1616 he decided to buy land on the island of Newfoundland, today in Canada. Specifically, it was in the south of the Avalon Peninsula. Not lacking in ambition, William had bought land a quarter the size of Wales. He had great confidence in his choice and wrote, "I saw that God had reserved the Newfoundland for us Britines."
It seems certain that William had not seen any of the land that he'd bought, and so he would have had limited knowledge of the landscape and of the climate. Reports written at the time, intended to attract migrants, depicted Newfoundland as a kind of Eden.
In 1617, William paid for his first group of colonists to make the sea journey to what he had decided to call Cambriol, a little Wales. There may not have been many of them, perhaps just a few dozen. However, he wasn't among them because he had fallen ill. The colonists were delivered to an established fishing harbour and, it seems, left to get on with it. They settled on land at Trepassey. It was on the coast near rich fishing grounds, although it isn't known whether any of these newcomers was skilled at sea fishing. Spanish, Portuguese and French ships were already hauling in the cod, and new competition would not be welcomed. And the French claimed this part of the Americas as their own, and harassed the new arrivals. A year passed. Then William asked Sir Richard Whitbourne, a highly experienced sea captain who had fought the Spanish Armada alongside Sir Francis Drake, to deliver more colonists in 2 ships. William had decided that Sir Richard was to be the governor of Cambriol. But disaster struck when pirates, ironically perhaps deserters from Drake's fleet, stole one of the 2 ships. This ship was carrying fishermen, who may therefore never have arrived at the colony.
Upon his arrival, Sir Richard found the colonists in a bad way, and he was not impressed that they had done nothing. They had spent the winter sheltering and shivering in huts that had been built by fishermen.
Sir Richard considered that the colonists were lazy and lacked initiative. He wrote to William, "The people had remained there a whole year before I came there, or knew any of them, and never applied themselves to any commendable thing, or not so much as to make themselves a house to lodge in, but lay in such cold and simple rooms all the winter, as the fishermen had formerly built there.
An alternative interpretation could be that the Welsh colonists lacked the right skills, were poorly provisioned, ill-equipped, and perhaps also lacked leadership.
Poor diet had given the newcomers scurvy, and they may have been inadequately equipped for the chilly Newfoundland winters, where temperatures can hover around freezing. It seems reasonable to assume that they had not realised how tough would be the task that they faced. Sir Richard tried to get things moving with the newer arrivals, but it appears that he concluded that it was just too difficult. He decided to send all but 6 settlers back to Wales. Perhaps they were glad to go home. He then moved the few who remained to what was considered a better location at Renews. But with so few people and prospects not looking good, some of the land was soon sold off. Despite all this, in 1620, Sir Richard published a book extolling the virtues of this new territory. Called A Discourse and Discovery of Newfoundland, it was another attempt to attract settlers to a land of forests, furs, fish, and friendly indigenous people. It was indeed a land of opportunity for healthy, hardy, and motivated people who were well equipped, well led, and ready for a big challenge. It is most likely, but not certain, that William Vaughan arrived at Cambriol, probably for the first time, in about 1622, by which time at least a house had been built for him. By some accounts he stayed for 4 years. He wrote a book called The Golden Fleece, an allegory of a classical adventure blended with religious, philosophical and political thoughts. This too was intended to attract newcomers to an untamed land which William preferred to call entirely bountiful.
Then, quite remarkably, given his lack of any formal training, he wrote a medical book, The Newlander's Cure, in which he wrote of a number of remedies for problems that afflicted the settlers. He recommended the eating of prunes and currants to ward off scurvy, thereby anticipating the discovery of vitamin C.
William gave Welsh names to places on the peninsula. They can be seen on a contemporary map. There were Patagonia, Cardigan, Pembroke, Cardiff and Glamorgan, but these place names are long gone. They can't be seen on any maps today. William's colony was very fragile, challenged by cold winters, possibly inadequate supplies, poor health, and harassment by French fishermen. But he tried once more. Back in Wales in 1630, he urged well-to-do people to join him and invest in Newfoundland.
He spoke of how wonderful it all was. Free land was offered, but there were no takers. William would have to give up on his dream. Cambriol was to fail and be abandoned.
He returned to a life of writing, was knighted in 1628 and died in 1641. Sir William was buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in the parish church at Llangandairn in Carmarthenshire, where he is still remembered. Today, Newfoundland thrives. The Avalon Peninsula, the site of the intended Welsh colony, has a population of well over 250,000, and there is a Sir William Vaughan Trust there, set up by people intrigued by the story of the Welsh settlement that failed.
Sir William Vaughan was a compassionate, intelligent and energetic man, but his dream of Cambriol, a little Wales across the ocean, was not to be. It had collided with harsh reality. And so today, the story of Cambriol is a brief and largely forgotten chapter in the histories of Canada and Wales.